The marble floors of the courthouse were cold enough to feel through the thin soles of her worn-out flats. Eliza clutched the handle of the double stroller, her knuckles white. Inside, nestled under a shared pink blanket, her twins, Leo and Lily, slept soundly, blissfully unaware that their world was about to crumble. The eviction notice felt like a block of ice in her coat pocket. In 3 hours, a judge would make their homelessness official. She had done everything right. After her husband had walked out just weeks after discovering she was carrying twins, she had worked 2 jobs, stretched every dollar, and swallowed every last shard of her pride. But a sudden layoff, followed by Lily's bout with pneumonia and a mountain of medical bills, had been the final, fatal blow. Her savings were gone. Her last can of formula was half empty. The number in her bank account was a cruel joke, $6.17. A wave of nausea washed over her. She leaned her head against the cool wall, closing her eyes. She had no family to call, no friends who could afford to help. She was an island, and the tide was coming in. The thought of her babies sleeping in a shelter, or worse, in her car, sent a tremor of pure terror through her. This hearing was a formality, a final stamp on her failure as a mother. The heavy doors to the main hall swung open, and a wave of expensive suits and leather briefcases washed into the corridor. Eliza instinctively pulled the stroller closer, making herself smaller. These people belonged here, in this world of power and consequence. She was just a ghost haunting the edges. Julian Thorne strode through the center of the group, his presence a vortex that pulled all attention toward him. He was a man carved from granite and ambition, his face a mask of cold indifference. His name was a fixture in the city's financial pages, CEO of Thorne Industries, a titan of technology and real estate. He was flanked by a team of lawyers who moved with the predatory grace of sharks. He was here, she'd overheard someone whisper, to finalize his divorce. A clean cut, another asset liquidated. Julian's mind was on the board meeting next week, on the quarterly reports, on the soulless, transactional end of a marriage that had been a strategic alliance and nothing more. The courtroom was just another boardroom, the judge another shareholder to be managed. He despised the wasted time. His estranged wife, a woman who had cared more for his portfolio than his person, would get her settlement, and he would get his freedom. It was simple. Then he saw her. A woman leaning against the wall, her face pale with a despair so profound it seemed to suck the air out of the hallway. And in the stroller before her, 2 small, perfect faces sleeping under a worn pink blanket. Twins. The world stopped. The chatter of his lawyers faded into a dull roar. The polished marble floor seemed to fall away. 5 years vanished in the space of a heartbeat, and he was back on a rain-slicked road, the smell of gasoline and burning rubber in the air. He saw Amelia's face, her smile fading as her eyes closed for the last time. She had been carrying their twins. They had already picked out names, Leo and Lily. A raw, ragged sound clawed its way up his throat, but he choked it back down, turning it into a sharp intake of breath. One of his lawyers glanced at him, concerned. "Mr. Thorne, are you all right?" Julian couldn't answer. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the 2 children, a boy and a girl. He felt an irrational, primal pull, a protective instinct so fierce it staggered him. It was as if the universe was showing him a ghost of the life that had been stolen from him. His focus shattered. The divorce proceedings passed in a blur. He signed where his lawyer pointed, his mind 1,000 miles away, fixed on the image of that mother and her children. When he emerged from the courtroom an hour later, his sham marriage officially dissolved, he saw her again. She was pushing the stroller toward the exit, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The verdict was written in the weary line of her back. Julian's feet moved before his mind had caught up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Eliza flinched, turning around. Her eyes, shadowed with exhaustion, widened as she recognized him. She immediately felt defensive, a trespasser caught in the king's path. "I'm sorry, am I in your way?" "No," Julian said quickly. He looked from her tired face to the sleeping children. "I saw you earlier. You looked distressed." Her pride flared, hot and sharp. "I'm fine." The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. He ignored it. His gaze was intense, analytical, yet underneath it, she saw something else, something deeply wounded. "You were here for a hearing. Eviction." Eliza's throat tightened. She simply nodded, unable to speak past the lump of humiliation. "I want to help you," he stated, not asked. It sounded like a command, a business directive. She gave a short, bitter laugh. "I don't need your charity." "This isn't charity," he countered, his tone softening slightly. "It's an offer. I need an assistant in my company's legal department. A paralegal. The position comes with a signing bonus and access to corporate housing. Effective immediately." Eliza stared at him, bewildered and deeply suspicious. How could he possibly know she had a paralegal certificate, one she hadn't been able to use in years? "How do you?" "My head of security is very efficient," he said, cutting her off. He had tasked the man with finding out who she was the moment he laid eyes on her. It had taken less than 10 minutes. "Eliza Vance. Top of your class. A resume full of temp jobs you took to make ends meet. You're overqualified for half of them and underutilized in all of them." The sheer invasion of privacy sent a chill down her spine. This man had dissected her life in the time it took her to lose her home. "You had me investigated?" she whispered, horrified. "I had you vetted," he corrected. "I don't make blind investments." "The job is yours, Eliza. A salary of $90,000 a year. A 3-bedroom apartment downtown, fully furnished. First month's rent and deposit covered." The numbers were so astronomical, so far removed from her reality of counting loose change for a gallon of milk, that she couldn't process them. It had to be a trick. A cruel, twisted game. Men like him didn't help women like her without a price. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. His eyes flickered to the twins, a flicker of raw pain so swift she almost missed it. "I want to solve a problem," he said, his voice low. "Your problem is my solution." It made no sense. But as Leo stirred in his sleep, his little hand reaching out, her resolve crumbled. She looked at her children, then back at this powerful, enigmatic stranger who was offering her a lifeline. Her pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Okay," she breathed, the word tasting of surrender and a terrifying, desperate hope. "Okay." The corporate apartment was bigger than any place Eliza had ever lived. It had floor-to-ceiling windows with a breathtaking view of the city, a kitchen filled with gleaming and used appliances, and 3 bedrooms. It felt sterile, impersonal, and overwhelmingly safe. True to his word, Julian Thorne's people had arranged everything. A moving service had collected her few meager possessions from her old apartment. The pantry and refrigerator were fully stocked. There were 2 brand-new cribs in one of the bedrooms, surrounded by boxes of diapers, wipes, and enough formula to last a year. The sheer scale of his generosity was suffocating. Every time she turned around, another problem had been silently, efficiently solved. A car service was arranged to take her to and from the Thorne Industries Tower. A company credit card was issued for incidentals. A nanny service had been contacted and vetted, with 3 candidates ready for her to interview. Eliza felt like a doll in a very expensive dollhouse. She started her job in the legal department, and it was real. The work was challenging, and she was good at it. Her colleagues were professional, if a little intimidated by the fact that the CEO himself had personally hired her. But Julian was a constant, looming presence. He would find reasons to walk through her department. He'd call her into his office for updates she could have easily sent in an email. His questions were never about work. They were always about the twins. How did Leo sleep? Has Lily's cough gone away? Do they need anything? Her suspicion grew into a constant, gnawing anxiety. This wasn't just kindness. It was an obsession. He seemed to be memorizing every detail about her children. One afternoon, she returned to her office to find a state-of-the-art baby monitor on her desk, one that linked to a mobile app. A gift, the attached note said. It felt more like a surveillance device. The breaking point came a month later. She arrived home from work to find Julian in her apartment. He was on the floor in the living room, building a tower of blocks with Leo while Lily babbled happily in his lap. The nanny looked on nervously. Mr. Thorne was just stopping by to drop off some things, the nanny explained, her eyes wide. A cold fury, sharp and protective, surged through Eliza. "I think you should leave," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Julian looked up, his face unreadable. He gently placed Lily on the play mat and stood up, brushing off his immaculate trousers. "Eliza, I was in the neighborhood. This is my home," she said, her hands clenched into fists. "You don't just get to walk in here. You don't get to play dad with my children. I don't understand what this is, what you want from me, but it has to stop. I can't live like this, waiting for the other shoe to drop. So tell me, what is the price for all of this? He stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching until it was taut with tension. The mask of the powerful CEO finally cracked, and underneath was a man hollowed out by grief. Come to my office tomorrow night, he said, his voice strained. After everyone has gone home, I'll tell you everything. The next evening, Eliza walked into Julian's penthouse office feeling as if she were walking to her own execution. The room was a testament to his power, all dark wood, glass, and a panoramic view of the city lights. He was standing by the window, his back to her. 5 years ago, he began, his voice empty, I had a fiancée. Her name was Amelia. He turned around, and in his hand was a small, silver-framed photograph. He held it out to her. Eliza took it hesitantly. The woman in the picture was beautiful, with a bright, joyful smile. There was a faint, passing resemblance to Eliza in the shape of her eyes, but they were strangers. She was killed in a car accident, Julian continued, his voice thick with unshed tears. A drunk driver ran a red light. She died instantly. She was 8 months pregnant. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Oh, Julian, I'm so sorry. She was carrying twins, he whispered, the words tearing out of him. A boy and a girl. We had already chosen their names. Leo and Lily. The air left Eliza's lungs. It was impossible. A coincidence so staggering it defied belief. She looked from the photograph to Julian's anguished face, and suddenly, his obsession, his disproportionate kindness, it all snapped into a devastating, heartbreaking focus. The day I saw you in the courthouse, he said, his gaze distant, standing there with your children, with Leo and Lily. It was like seeing a ghost. It felt like the universe was giving me a second chance, not to replace what I lost. Nothing could ever do that, but to honor it, to protect the life I couldn't protect before. He sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. I know it was wrong, invading your privacy, forcing my way into your life. It wasn't about control. It was about fear. I was terrified of something happening to you, to them. I just wanted to build a fortress around you. Eliza walked over to him, her own anger completely dissolved, replaced by a wave of profound empathy. She placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. You're not a monster, Julian, she said softly. You're a man who is grieving. That simple act of understanding broke him. A single, silent tear traced a path down his cheek. In that moment, the wall between the billionaire and the single mother, between boss and employee, crumbled into dust. They were just two people, brought together by a tragedy and a bizarre twist of fate. Their relationship shifted after that night. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative trust. Julian stopped being an overbearing benefactor and started being a friend. He still helped, but now he asked first. He would join her and the twins for picnics in the park on weekends, his joy in their presence genuine and heartwarming. Eliza found herself looking forward to his visits, to their late-night talks after the children were asleep. She saw the kind, wounded man beneath the corporate armor, and he saw the fierce, resilient woman who had fought for her children against impossible odds. But as their bond deepened, a shadow began to grow within Thorne Industries. Marcus Vance, Julian's ambitious executive vice president, watched the change in his boss with a predatory interest. He saw Julian's newfound happiness not as a recovery, but as a distraction, a weakness to be exploited. Marcus had been positioning himself for years to take over, and this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. He started subtly, planting seeds of doubt among the board members. He spoke of Julian's erratic behavior, his unprofessional attachment to a junior employee. He hinted at company resources being used for personal matters. Then he made his move. He fabricated a series of financial transfers, expertly weaving them through shell accounts until they appeared to originate from Eliza's work computer, ending in an offshore account in her name. It looked like a clear case of embezzlement, a single mother taking advantage of a grieving, vulnerable CEO. The blow came during a senior management meeting. An emergency board meeting had been called. An anonymous tip, Marcus claimed, had led him to uncover a disturbing financial irregularity. With feigned reluctance, he presented the falsified documents. Eliza, who was present to take minutes, felt the blood drain from her face. Her name was on every page. The board members stared at her, their expressions a mixture of shock and contempt. "This is absurd," Julian said, his voice lethally calm, but Eliza could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The evidence was damning. "I didn't do this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Julian, you have to believe me." "Believe you?" Marcus sneered. "The woman he pulled out of an eviction court and handed a six-figure job in a luxury apartment? It's the oldest story in the book." The board erupted in murmurs. Julian was cornered. Defending Eliza would make him look like a fool, blinded by emotion. The vote to place him on temporary leave pending a full investigation was a near certainty. His empire was about to be stolen by the man he had once considered his protégé. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated Eliza. She wasn't just a struggling mother. She was a sharp, meticulous paralegal who had spent the last 2 months immersed in the company's legal and financial structures. And she had noticed things. Small discrepancies in Marcus's expense reports, odd firewall requests from his department. At the time, they were just minor puzzles, but now they clicked into place. "He's lying," Eliza said, her voice ringing with newfound strength. She stood up, meeting the gaze of every person in the room. "And I can prove it." Ignoring the chaos, she walked to the conference room's smartboard and connected her tablet. For the past month, Marcus has been accessing the server from a remote IP address, bypassing company security protocols. He claimed it was for working from home, but the timestamps are odd. They're always just before or just after his large-scale data transfers. She pulled up server logs, her fingers flying across the screen. These transfers, which he's framed to look like they came from me, were routed through a proxy server based in the Cayman Islands. The same server where the offshore account in my name was created. But what he didn't count on, she said, her eyes locking with Marcus's, is that a portion of those funds weren't sent to my framed account. They were sent to another 1-inch. With a final tap, she displayed the account details. The name on it was not Eliza Vance. It was for a holding company, one whose sole director was Marcus's own brother. It was the money he was using to quietly buy up shares for his hostile takeover. She had found the connection just the night before, driven by a gut feeling that something was wrong. The room fell silent. Marcus's face had turned a pasty white. He was exposed, his intricate scheme dismantled in minutes by the very woman he had tried to destroy. Julian looked at Eliza, his expression a mixture of awe, relief, and profound love. She hadn't just saved herself, she had saved him. He stood up and walked to her side. "Security," he said, his voice like steel. "Escort Mr. Vance out of the building. And call the police." As Marcus was led away, sputtering threats and denials, the boardroom door closed, leaving Julian and Eliza alone. The adrenaline faded, leaving them in a quiet bubble of shared victory. "You were incredible," Julian breathed, reaching out and taking her hands. "He picked the wrong single mom to mess with," she said, a shaky smile on her face. "Eliza," he said, his voice low and serious. "When I first met you, I thought I was saving you. But I was wrong. You saved me. Not just today. Every day. You and Leo and Lily. You brought me back to life." He lifted a hand to cup her cheek. "This started because of Amelia, but it's not about her anymore. This is about you. I love you, Eliza Vance." Tears welled in her eyes. Tears of joy and overwhelming relief. "I love you too, Julian." He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that wasn't about gratitude or shared trauma, but about a future that had suddenly, miraculously, opened up before them. 1 year later, the scent of pine needles and cinnamon filled the grand living room of their home. A magnificent Christmas tree stood by the window, its lights reflecting in the eyes of 2 toddlers who were staring at it in wonder. Leo reached out a chubby hand to bat at a low-hanging ornament, while Lily clapped her hands, babbling excitedly. Eliza watched them from the sofa, a warm mug of tea in her hands, a soft blanket draped over her lap. Julian came and sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. He pressed a kiss to her temple. They were married now, a quiet ceremony 3 months ago with just a few close friends. "Happy," he murmured into her hair. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a deep, contented sigh escaping her lips. "More than I ever thought possible." Her life was unrecognizable from the desperate, terrified existence of a year ago. She was no longer just an employee. Together, She and Julian had launched the Thorn Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal aid, housing, and job training for single mothers. She was its director, using her skills and her own experience to help women who were trapped in the same hopeless situation she had once been in. She had purpose, security, and a love so profound it felt like the bedrock of her world. Julian followed her gaze to the twins, a soft smile on his face. They had started calling him Dada a few months back, a word that never failed to make his heart ache with a fierce, protective joy. He was no longer a man haunted by ghosts. He was a husband and a father. "It's funny," Eliza said softly, her thoughts drifting back. "I used to think that day at the courthouse was the worst day of my life. The absolute end of everything." She turned to look at him, her eyes shining with love. "But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A wrong turn that led me exactly where I needed to be." He tightened his arm around her, his heart full. They had found each other in the wreckage of their pasts, two broken people who, together with two tiny, innocent children, had built a new and beautiful life. They had become a family, and they were home.